Thank you very much. These are three very important and exciting questions. I need to think whether I want to come back to Malaysia or not, and depending how I'm going to answer the question. Let me think. I haven't been to several cities. I haven't been to Johor Bahru. I haven't been to Langkawi. I want to come back again, so I'm going to be nice to the minister. No, I'm going to be honest with the minister. I don't know under... You quoted me the report. I didn't see the minister's reasoning behind it and so on, but it does seem to me that it is lacking in a certain kind of clarity. I need to know more about what he means by liberalism and you know the kinds of things that you quoted there. I don't remember the entire phrase because there was a communications deficit there. But from what I understand from my friends, that has been going on about liberalism and what's the other thing that people have been condemning here? Pluralism and so on, yes. It's clear that there's some particular meaning what they mean by pluralism, liberalism, and I think it's very different from the stuff that I'm talking about. And so I think we're talking about apples and oranges. I'm talking about apples, they're talking about oranges or maybe lemons. Something very, you know, very unpalatable for them. I think it requires a very careful examination and a much more enlightened conversation. I think that in a society, the very idea that Malaysia has accepted, constitution and otherwise, the plurality of communities, religious communities, ethnic communities, is already on the way to liberalism. You're already on a certain kind of liberalism. It might not be the optimal one, but it's already there. If you want to get away from liberalism, you need to tear up the Malaysian constitution and begin knocking down the foundations of what the society is about. So I don't know what these people are, what these representatives are talking about. These are, I mean, I know, for instance, the founders of this country were educated in the United Kingdom. They came from Oxford and Cambridge. They had liberal education at the heart of it. You inherited a British foundation of the order here. Questions of rights is liberal. These are liberal rights we are talking about. So I don't know what they are talking about. This is, I think, the first thing that we done, that many of those spokespersons who are saying these things need a quick lesson in Malaysian history. And Malaysian History 101 to refamiliarize themselves with the foundations of the society. And then we can have a grown-up conversation. Right now, this is not a grown-up conversation. So I'm looking forward to coming back and having a grown-up conversation on the question of liberalism and pluralism. But I've started the conversation of pluralism. Insecurity. So the question is, why are Muslims the only people that are insecure? That's the first question we need to ask. Muslims are 1.2 billion people in the world. Some people say 1.4 billion. They are global, they have enormous wealth. They are the greatest controllers of oil and other kinds of resources. What is there to be insecure about? And that insecurity can be remedied in a number of ways. The quick fix is to, and there'll be a big future for a lot of shrinks, psychological treatment, but that's not what I mean. That's just a joke. Okay, no, that's a quick fix. But the more serious thing is that you only become insecure when you are ignorant about yourself, and you lack confidence in your tradition and your history and your values. So the remedy to insecurity is greater self-knowledge. And oftentimes people think that knowing elementary religion is self-knowledge. Elementary religion and practicing religion is not self-knowledge. It's a set of rituals. It's beginning to understand the meaning of those rituals. To understand your relationship with God and you understand your relationship with the cosmos. And to begin to understand your finitude in relation to this great infinity of possibilities that you begin to develop an understanding of security. So oftentimes I think that this insecurity is self-constructed. It is sometimes this insecurity is told to people by politicians over and over and again to win vote banks. And this not only happens here, it happens in a variety of countries and so on. Christians do it elsewhere. You know, in the United States, where I come from, I mean, evangelicals and the Tea Party say that to Christians all the time and drive them in droves into the arms of certain kind of politicians and tell them the Muslims are coming. Telling them, you know, the blacks are going to take over the country. The Latinos are now the new threat. Okay, in America. So this kind of scare tactics is something that happens all the time. But that is the way, because the insecurity is that those communities are not properly edified. They're not educated, and they're not told that, you know, self-understanding is lacking. And so therefore the quick fixes are that is the kinds of, you know, sloganizing and demonizing the others are the quick fixes. And the people who do that are actually doing those communities no good service. It's actually destroying those communities in the long term. Because the long-term remedy is to establish deep confidence within those societies. And they know who they are and what they are. And people can be, Muslims and others can be very strong in their own traditions, provided they understand the traditions in the best way. There's a bad way of understanding Islam, and there's a good way of understanding Islam. Every religion is like that. There is the Al-Qaeda version of Islam, the ISIS version of Islam that believes in destroying people. And then there's the Rumi version of Islam, and then there's the Ibn Arabi version of Islam. Ibn Arabi would say things like, لَقَدْ صَارَ قَلْبِ قَابِلًا كُلَّ صُورَةٍ فَمَرْأَ لِغِزْلَانٍ وَدَيْرٌ لِرُهْبَانٍ وَبَيْتٌ لِأَوْثَانٍ وَكَعْبَةُ طَائِفٍ وَأَلْوَاحُ تَوْرَاتٍ وَمُصْحَفُ قُرْآنٍ أَدِينُ بِدِينِ الْحُبِّ أَيْنَ تَوَجَّهَتْ رَكَائِبُهُ فَالْحُبُّ دِينِي وَإِيمَانِي. My heart is a receptacle for every form. My heart is a receptacle for every possibility. It is the pasture for gazelles. It is a monastery for the monk. It is a temple for the idolater. It is the pilgrim's Kaaba. It is a place where the pages of the Torah and the scrolls of the Quran finds a place. I confess the religion of love wherever its caravan takes me, for love is my religion and my faith. That is another version of Islam that your maybe religious leaders don't tell you about. That's another version of Islam that makes you supremely confident that all the beauty and diversity of religious faith can be accommodated and understood through the meaning of love. And that takes me to the gentleman's question about the exclusivity. The exclusivity, each religion comes within a historical framework and time and addresses some problems. So therefore it formulates its dogma in some kind of exclusive ways. But within those exclusive ways of articulating, there are also possibilities of plurality. Now when you put them over gazillions of years together over time, and then now they live side by side, you have Buddhism living next to Hinduism, living next to Jainism, next to Judaism and Christianity, Islam. You're talking about thousands of years. We're not talking about 1400 years of Islam. We're talking about many, many thousands of years. Now these religions and traditions have morphed, but now they've all also discovered within themselves the possibilities of plurality. So while they make exclusive claims in terms of dogma, they also have within them notions and possibilities, teachings that tell them all about respecting your neighbor, the dignity of humanity. So no matter what kind of Judaism you have, that Judaism believes in the chosen of the Jewish people and all the others are goyim, even in that tradition, the dignity of all humanity is taught. In Islam, the dignity, in Hinduism, that has its entire caste system, still there are possibilities of talking about the dignity. So I think that there are overlapping developments within this religious traditions. When read superficially, they might see very antithetical and paradoxical. But if those adherents work hard at those traditions, and those traditions do not have to be the same as they were developed on day one, they evolve over time within themselves, they can arrive at notions of coexistence and possibility. So that's how I would address your dilemma in itself. So yes, so people, Muslims and Christians will disagree on how they think about Jesus, but those don't become insurmountable differences. They still have to show charity to each other. They must still show love to each other. And that question about how they conceive of Jesus, one sees of Jesus as a prophet, the other sees Jesus as incarnation of the divine, that's something they will keep on talking about. And that's what they're supposed to do. They need to keep on talking about those things, not fighting. And they need to discourse with each other. And the Quran says, at least the tradition I know, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and engage people with that which is beautiful, in conversation that is beautiful, not shooting them down and insulting them and doing detrimental things. I'm appalled by Muslim preachers who are imported from South Africa and from India and so on, who come do anti-Christian preaching, and insult the Bible and insult Christians and so on. That is not what Islam taught. And I'm appalled by the number of Muslims who go and listen to them. I'm appalled. You ought to have better sense not to subject yourself to that kind of ridicule. Okay? So I think that's, and I'm glad to know that in Malaysia some of those elements are banned. They don't have to come here. I don't think you should ban them. The people of Malaysia should just not go to their meetings. Let them sit alone on the stage. That's what should be happening. I don't think banning works. But anyway, thank you.
Any two questions? One.
Hi, my name is Mustaqim from KL. I have a bit of a problem with toleration, because I think I see there's a limit to toleration. So when we the way I understand the verse lita'arafu, get to know each other, toleration won't be enough. You have to won't be enough. You have to appreciate. I think in this country, in particular in Malaysia, for instance, we've been talking about toleration, but we get nowhere. Instead, in fact, we are regressing. For long, Muslims and non-Muslim have been living with each other, but we don't appreciate the culture of others. We tolerate. We say we tolerate, but at this point of time now, I mean, there are a lot of issues come to the surface. Thanks.
Next one, please.
Sorry, just to follow up on that question. I think part of the reason that why people feel insecure in Malaysia is that the fear of apostasy, that you would leave your religion if you accept diversity. And that goes down to the fact that in our constitution, the majority group, the Malays, are by definition, by constitutional definition, Muslim. And the religious authorities fear that, if you allow different views, pluralism, and then it leads to the deconstructions of the ethnic majority. So we'd like to have your view on religious freedom for Muslims. Thank you.
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the speaker a question. There are so many schools of jurisprudence in Islam. Would you agree with me that the Jafari school is the one that preaches more of tolerance, and that it is and what should I say, tolerance and a way of love or understanding through dialogue, rather than getting a ruling of fatwa and so on from a Khalif?
Thank you very much. The speaker who asked about toleration, I want to clarify, I was not advocating tolerance. what I was citing in the first part of my presentation was the idea of British political philosophers, the idea of toleration. Hobbes and Locke and others talk about the idea of toleration because we cannot agree on reason and we cannot come to a rational consensus. Therefore, the idea of toleration. So toleration is slightly different from the idea of what we call today tolerance. That's more of a philosophical idea, that what then creates the possibility for toleration, that you must now have multiple consensus that exist. But I'm with you totally that the idea of tolerance is a bad idea. Because the idea of tolerance, that I only tolerate you while I am powerless, but once I become empowered, I will overpower you. So that the idea of tolerance that we throw about is a very weak idea. I'm with you that we need something that has greater legs. And you have gone in the right direction to say that we need to appreciate, in other words, what I understand by that, if I can put a gloss on that, is that what you're saying that we need to appreciation through learning and through experiencing and through knowing well what the other traditions are all about, so that we can find overlapping meanings in what. So for instance, Christians have love, Muslims have love, there's charity, there's notions of generosity and so on. It's only that you begin to know Christians, or you know Hindus or Sikhs or other traditions and so on, then you begin to understand what's going on. Once you know people's traditions and you start talking to them, you're beginning to understand yourself and you understand the other. That is the way that we come to know each other. It's just not through academic learning, but also through coexistence, meaningful coexistence. I always say that it must be the case in multicultural societies that people should be visiting each other's sacred places on the big holidays. Now, I'm sure there are some people going to say, all the Hindus and Christians can come to Muslims, the Muslims can't go to the Sikh Gurdwara, or they can't go. I'm sure there are people who are going to say that. But just imagine you are in Australia and not in Malaysia. I'm speaking in Australia right now, where there might be sensible people that I can talk to. And they might hear me without the kind of governmental lenses that will say this or that, or some kind of theologians doing it. But in the United States, I'm encouraging Muslims do that. They invite on their holidays Christians for a celebration, Jews to a celebration, Hindus to a celebration on the holidays. That's how people come to know each other. And that should be reciprocated. I remember very well that about 2 decades ago, the country called Sudan? Sudan is a big majority Muslims. There are also Christians and people of other traditions there. The people from the south of Sudan came, and they came to South Africa, and we welcomed that delegation in a mosque. The Christian Sudanese was in tears. He said, I've lived in Sudan all my life, I've never been in the inside of a mosque. It's a shameful experience that the society's mosque doors are not open to other people. This is how you come to know. And you sit with us, and you break bread. And you break bread. And you come to learn each other. That's how it happens. So I'm with you on, and there are examples in the Islamic tradition of collaboration. The Prophet Muhammad, before he announced prophecy, when he was in Makkah, he was involved in what we today call an NGO kind of activity, known as the Pledge of the Virtuous, the Hilful Fudul, where they engaged in helping the poor. And he was collaborating with people who were polytheists, people of faith that is antithetical to monotheism. He did it. Not only did he do it, when he announced prophecies in Medina, he happily recalled back that time when he was that kind of activist, and he said, if it happens today, I'll be part of that again. I wish I can do that. And he didn't say, I'm not going to work with the mushrikeen, with the polytheists. He said, if it happens, if that kind of opportunity arises again, I'll be part of that. So it's only through collaboration and working in common solidarity and common causes that we come to know and appreciate each other, as you said. And that is genuine pluralism. That will be pluralism in action. The question of, the follow-up to the insecurity question and apostasy, and people will leave religions and so on. I think that's an unfounded fear. I mean, maybe there's something in the Malay DNA that they are predisposed to apostasy, but in other countries, people are not. In Egypt, in other countries where there are Christians, people are. I mean, Muslims are not becoming Christians or Jews or Buddhists or Hindus in their droves. India is a great example, magnificent example. Nothing happens. So maybe this is a issue that is either manufactured, but it has no reason, it has no legs in reason. It might be some kind of myth or superstition, and I wish to argue with you. And I'm sure you don't hold that view. You're just the messenger. Yeah. No, because if you held that view, I would like to argue with you. Why are you saying that? So I think there's something. I mean, I think it's deeply offensive to such people to say that people will convert. On what grounds would they convert? I mean, the British and Christian missionaries tried to convert people in India. We would call them rice Christians and so on. That didn't give enormous disruption and so on. And I think that if you close the doors to people, they'll become more curious of what is elsewhere, and they might find something attractive, and then they will really generally convert. So I think that it doesn't have any ground in reason, to my knowledge, and it's also not have any ground in Islamic teachings. You cannot la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in matters of religion. You cannot box people in. People need to be able to make choices. I mean, the individuals. I mean, true faith is when you have the freedom to choose, not the coercion to choose. Not coerced to choose. That is no choice. That is coercion. So, yeah. The question about the Jafari school. And Jafari school is one of number of schools. Is the school of, for those of you who don't know, is the school of thought that people. There are two major theological creeds in Islam: the Sunni creed and the Shia creed. And each one of them also different from within. But the Jafari school is the law school that people of the Shia tradition accept. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether there's greater tolerance or lesser tolerance. All of these schools teach tolerance, these diversity. The tolerance doesn't really, come from the law schools. The law schools tell you about the do's and don'ts of practical matters. There are theologies that have developed in all the law, that some of these law schools adhere to, theologies that develop. Theologies of exclusivism. Theologies of very strong exclusivism, that a believer shall not be killed for killing an unbeliever. And these were theologies developed when Islam was an empire. And it's the imperial mentality that also works its way into religious teachings. And so one of the things why religion continuously gets renewed, and in Islam the idea of the renewal of the faith, the question of ijtihad and tajdeed, renewal and continuous intellectual effort, is precisely this. And in Islam there's also a providential teaching to it, that God will send, or God expects at the beginning of every 100 years, that people will come to renew the faith. But every 100 years, in other words, time changes practices, and these practices need to be updated. And so in the theology of democracy is different from a theology of empire. And therefore that kind of teachings about exclusivism and so on, most Muslims don't really know about it, or when they do come to know about it, they really feel oppressed by it, because that doesn't seem to be very equal and fair. But it's available in some of the textbooks, and some people do advocate it. And so you're going to find in ISIS, for instance, ISIS's caliphate and so on, where they're going to do crazy things, that the first thing they do is they want to make non-Muslims into medieval notions of minorities, and then they want to tax them the jizya and call them dhimmis. So that is the kind of un-Islam that has really have no intellectual legs on it, extremely passion, complete passion. And there's a point I want to make about why do you have phenomena like ISIS and these people that from here leaving, and going to fight, is precisely because it's a kind of a radical form of individualism. So ISIS actually and Al-Qaeda are not people who are adhering to tradition. They make up their tradition as they go along. Part of the problem is, part of the Muslim dilemma is, that there are no good traditional leadership in the Muslim world per se. Most Muslim Orthodox traditional leadership intellectually have major deficits. They don't understand the world they're living in. That's not part of their theological training. The interpretation of things are out of sync with reality. So that's one of the problems. So radical individualism that morphed in Salafism and so on has basically gone kind of, is basically on speed. So what you have is Islam on speed, where these individuals are just picking and choosing and making things up as they go on, because there is no authority of tradition or the idea of the sacred that's restraining them. So oftentimes religion is a thing that does restraint. There is no restraint. There is complete, a certain kind of hedonism in the name of Islam. Absolutely theologically hedonistic. Anything goes. It is all about power, brute power. Not that religion or other things are not about power. Power is in everything that we do. But power can be constructive and power can be destructive. And this is brute power only for destructive purposes. And I put the blame squarely at the feet of Muslim religious traditional leadership, who are not doing their job in producing a better class of religious leaders that can deal with the realities of the world and be deeply expert in the tradition and understand the tradition, how it should be working today. That is the problem of Islam, modern Islam and contemporary Islam, that we don't have that class. And therefore you see, one foolish statement after the other, one embarrassment after the other. These are deeply embarrassing things that one hears that come through the media on a global basis in the name of Islam. That is not the Al-Qaeda. That is in itself, you don't even have to respond to the Al-Qaeda, ISIS kind of thing, but that is sheer madness in the name of Islam. Okay? But I'm talking about those who think about that they're intelligible about Islam, right? And who have audiences. That is the deep embarrassment. And that is the responsibility that Muslims must take. And each one has a responsibility to address that. To address that. Thank you.
Alright, I think I'll hand over the... Oh, you have one more? Yeah, okay.
See that the front row is very active.
No, Professor. No, I appreciate what you have to say and what YB has said. But then this issue of insecurity and so on, in every country, as you mentioned what's happened in the States, I've also lived there. So what happens is that, I may be wrong, but I would say that 90% of humanity consists of lemmings who will just follow and be swayed, and they're not people intellectual or who will look into reasoning, but they will just be swayed by either politicians or religious leaders. Do you see any change happening? Because even when you speak in terms of education, people are not being educated correctly.
I think the aspiration of all societies is to make people literate. And there are basic elements of literacy, and I think, today that a number of people have come to listen, to educate themselves, and people educate themselves through a variety of media and so on.
It's the same crowd.
No, but it's the same crowd, but there are also other crowds that are reading books and doing some things and so on a daily basis and so on. So what I'm saying is yes, there are some, look, every community tries to send their children to school. They're hoping for greater aspiration. People must have going to learn science, going to learn other things. People have professions. People make decisions. We're having advances. So I'm not entirely persuaded that people are like sheep. I think the aspiration is that we are hoping, and we invest a lot of time and energy to make individuals understand what kind of choices they make. Now, yes, of course, we're not always very successful in that. But we do know that governments coming to power and are thrown out of power. People have changed their minds on major issues. A couple of 100 years ago, we believed that it was a geocentric universe. Now we believe it's a heliocentric universe. Things have changed. So I don't believe that it is only in the political that people can be people spend billions of dollars to persuade people and still lose elections, and that means that some people are saying no. So I'm not entirely sure about that. I think that we must have the aspiration, in my view, the question of security and insecurity. Look, in the United States, Muslims after 9/11 did suffer some setback of insecurity and so on, but now they are moving forward. I mean, there's time that they overcome that. And 10,000, 15,000 people gather in Detroit or in Chicago at the Islamic Society of North America. That is only one sliver of the Muslim community. There are several million who don't come to those events. But at least there's a sign of a certain kind of confidence that people are moving. There are, women with hijab are getting to the workplace, and women without hijab and Muslim people with names and so on are becoming active in those societies. Even in Sarkozy's government, he had 2 Muslim women ministers of Muslim background. So, people are emerging in different places, and Muslims are not insecure. But they are being made insecure, and they are told they must be insecure. And these are the deflections that people in power utilize. They trade on they fabricate the fear, and then they trade on this fear. And therefore, it is our job to educate people to not fall prey to those kinds of fear-mongering and fear syndromes. Look, I come from a country, South Africa. South Africa is a 43 million population. Muslims are barely 1 million. We don't suffer of a fear syndrome that the majority is going to kill us or destroy us. If you are hardworking, you have a stake in that society. The future of security is that you must be a hard worker and you must have a stake in that society. If you are lazy, you're going to be fearful. But if you are working, you have a stake in that society. You're not going to allow anybody to upset your dreams, and you are going to prevent people from telling you hogwash in order to win your vote. You are going to say no to them. So it's only when you become a true stakeholder, whether you're a worker or whether you're the great astrophysicist, doesn't matter. You must make people have a stake in the society. And I think one of the ways in which people have made people dependent is where government becomes the nanny, and government gives handouts that make people dependent. So when government must be accountable. Government is not a handout machine. Government is not an ATM. And make people have a stake in society. Let them earn their place in society. You will have no insecurity. In fact, the politicians will feel insecure because they will now have to be accountable to people who have put their heart, their money, and their blood into what they have and what they own. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Zairil. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this lecture. I would like to hand over to Kanchana to close the session.
Thank you, Dr. Farooq, and thank you, everyone, for all the interesting questions posed. We have now come to the end of the event. Before we end, we would like to present a small token of appreciation to Professor Moosa and Dr. Farooq on behalf of Penang Institute. Thank you, YB Zairil. Thank you, Professor Moosa. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you gained much insight from this talk, and we have some light refreshments for you outside. Please do enjoy. And thank you once again.